Welcome to another edition of At Home with the President. I'm Anita Hubert. It's a gorgeous afternoon here on the lawns of the State House, and I'm pleased that the President has once again extended an invitation for us to come and chat with him. This week we're talking about the housing sector. And of course, as you know, this has been a premier sector for Guyana over the last 22 years. And so I'm anxious to talk with the President about his aspirations and how he plans to move forward in the sector. Mr. President, welcome to another program.
Thank you.
We are, of course, always pleased to talk with you and to hear your thoughts on all the things that are important at this time that the citizens want to hear about. But I've got to say that when we talk about the housing sector, it is a shining example of success for your government. And when you look at it, everything that you have done so far for the sector, it looks to me as if there was a deliberate effort to make this sector successful. Tell us about how you went about doing that.
Well, when we came to government, the situation in housing was really, really bad. People were living under very bad conditions and rents were very, very high. And one of the big cry of the people was for better housing. Many of them went to squatting and lived in really poor conditions without any type of facilities. So that was a priority for the government from the very beginning. But as you would realize, when we got into the office, our country was almost totally bankrupt. So we did a policy, first of all, of trying to help the low-income people by a system of cross-subsidization. What we did, we sold some front lands. We retired the sugar estates more and more into the backlands, sold some front lands to some higher, middle and higher income people for development, and used that together with government money to cross-subsidize to develop house lots, so that ordinary low-income people could have afforded to get their own house lots. So that is how it started, by government putting in resources, but because we didn't have all those resources, we did a position of cross-subsidization, and that is how the whole housing drive was launched. And that has gone a very, very far way now. We have since then, we have distributed more than 112,000 house lots into the sector, most of it to the low-income people. And rents, I think, people are living far better. Many of them are living in their own homes. We've had to also deal with the question of the banking system to get loans for them. You will recall at that time, too, a loan at the bank was more than 30%. We started to work to bring down the loans and eventually work with the banks to give them some tax breaks, using our tax policies to give them tax breaks so that they could have give loans to home builders at a lower interest rate. And that kept coming down, and we more or less perfect that method. So today we have quite a low and acceptable interest rates for people who are building their own homes.
I think what was interesting and certainly very admirable too is that you didn't just stop at having the New Building Society provide the low-income rates. You were able to get other banks, in fact all the banks, to come on board and offer that same rate, and you called it the low-income mortgage rates, yeah?
Yes, and I think they were very happy too, because housing people very rarely default on their house payment for their houses. So it was a good program that benefited all the parties. It was a win-win situation for everybody. The government was able to get people living in better circumstances. The banks were able to lend more money and have faster turnover for their money. And the people were able to borrow money at much lower interest rates than ever before in this sector.
Well, certainly, I know that you talk about what you inherited. We know rampant squatting was very evident during the time you came to power. Your government came to power, and then of course you had the issue of lack of access to finance. Most people could not access credit from their banks. What did you do to ensure that people were able to access those loans now?
Well, as I said, they had the collateral. People would have had a piece of land that they could use, and they also, with the incentive that we give the banks, they were able to bring down their interest rates. So people were able to have much more access to financing for housing. And I suspect largely because of the low default rate, as far as housing is concerned, the banks are eager to lend more and more people money to build their own homes. So I think those are some of the measures that we looked that were successful in helping the drive. Apart from that too, we also moved towards regularization of squatting area. Apart from the house lots that we've distributed, we regularized several squatting areas, scores of squatting areas that existed, demarcated them, give people title to the land. They were also able to go to the banks to get loan to build proper houses, to provide facilities for them like water, electricity, roads. So the housing drive included not only the distribution of land, but also the regularization of many squatter settlements and the provision of more modern essential services to people in these areas.
You're watching At Home with the President, and tonight we're talking with him about the housing sector. Now, Mr. President, we just talked about the successes you've had in the sector, in addition to, of course, regularizing many of those, some of the areas you have made sure that house lots, more than 112,000, I believe,
Yes.
you said you've given out. There was legislation passed as well.
Legislation was really designed to facilitate, in one instance, first-time homeowners. So one of the legislation we brought was kind of a rebate for mortgages paid.
Mortgage interest relief.
Mortgage interest relief that was passed in 2013. So now I think a lot of people are applying for that. I understand more than 1,200 persons have had 30% of their money, the interest that they paid on their mortgages, they had rebate on those interests that they paid. So it's a very good program to encourage and encouraging people, particularly young people, to own their own homes, and that is, I think, a very positive, because it helps in many ways. It has a other positive spin-off for people. It helps easing tension or overcrowding. You know, when people live in overcrowding conditions, it is one of the sources of tension and problems within families, and so we've reduced that considerably to allow more and more people to have their own homes, separate homes. They don't have in-laws interfering into their affairs. So the possibility of them being able to, well, to have like maybe better relationship with each other, having to solve their own problems without outside interference, probably has gone a far way to ease some of the social tension within the society. And those are some of the other benefits that it has. It has, of course, it brings other benefits to the economy as a whole, because it employs thousands of people, builders, landscape developers. You have to expand, government got to expand services to these areas. So if you can see there's a huge spin-off from the housing sector itself in the creating new jobs, new areas, new type of facilities that people will have. It's really a very important win-win situation for people and for our country as a whole.
But you have to also admit that you have been, there has been some criticisms, though, of the way the sector is. I know that one prominent analyst has said that the housing bubble will burst at some point. Some people have talked about if you give out more than 100,000 house lots with a population of 730-something thousand or thereabouts, how many people are getting the house lots? What do you say to those people?
Well, I believe there will always be need for housing. That is why we got to also start thinking about new forms of housing, about apartment buildings, and you see some private investors are going in that direction already, building because land, of course, it's limited, but you always will need housing. Why? Because if you give out 100,000 house lots, and you say one family with 4 people, you have that's about 400,000 people benefit from that. But that's a family with, let's say, 2 children. But the children are growing up, they need their own home. They want more and more young people want their own home. I know that things have changed a lot. I remember my own experience. I did not get my own home until I was 48 years old. But recently I went to the West Demerara at one of the one-stop shop operation the Ministry of Housing had. And I met many people who were 24 and 26 years old having their own home, which is an extremely good thing. For them to have their own homes at this time. Therefore, housing will be an issue that will always be there. Because you have a growing population, you have a young population, and people more and more going in their homes, starting new families and so forth. So it's a situation where you will constantly need to have housing, and we have to constantly think about what's the best way to go. Maybe we have to start thinking, as I mentioned, some private sector people going into more apartment buildings. Government has been going into other areas, like not only in the coastal areas where the housing problem was more acute, but in the interior we were going to core homes, helping people to have better quality homes, better standard of living, and encouraging people to live where you can provide more and more services to them. I myself went to 2 of those areas. There are much more, but I went to Whitewater in the Northwest District, and I went to Quatamang in the Rupununi area, where people were now having much beautiful homes built from the materials of the area. In Whitewater, most of the houses were wooden houses from the materials in the area there, where they had a really good organization of cooperation of people among themselves, together with the Ministry of Housing, and people owning their own homes. And in the Rupununi area, using the materials, the clay bricks and so forth, to also build very beautiful houses there. So that, you see how many jobs it can spin off? The brick builders, many people get employment in those areas. So that's an area I think they will always need. I don't see the danger that we have here about people talking about the housing bubble will burst and so forth. That was because in North America, very one of those developed economies where people were using housing as speculation and so forth. We are not doing that in our society. We are providing to people with real needs in our society.
All right, and since we're talking about the challenges, there are other things, and the fact that you talked about all the spin-off benefits we've had. You have people who are bringing in, contractors are benefiting, shops, many of our hardware departments, they're benefiting as well. But there has been, of course, some unscrupulous contractors. Some people are not, they're not honoring their agreements with homeowners and so on. Is there anything that your government plans to do about those unscrupulous contractors?
Yeah, I think we're dealing with them more and more condemningly. And a lot of things sometimes don't get reported. But I know that the Ministry of Housing has a very aggressive policy, and they have been capturing a lot of people who have been trying to defraud people by all kinds of schemes and scams that they have. And the ministry has done a commendable job in capturing and taking many of those people to court, getting some of them sentenced to jail and so forth. So I would say that we will take an aggressive position against anyone who tries to defraud people of their hard-earned cash for one scheme or the other. And we will continue to insist on standards. I know the ministry has developed a really good capacity, really good technical capacity for supervision and building a lot of the infrastructure in these areas. So if you go down, let's say Parfait Harmony, you're driving on a practically highway going into the new scheme that is there. If you go to Eccles or Providence, you see the quality of infrastructure that is going down in the area, the roads, the water system, the electricity system. And a lot of that work is being done by the ministry in-house, which is saving billions of dollars for the economy, so that not everything goes to the contractor, but a lot of work is being done internally by the ministry itself, and in design, and the designing of roads, and the designing of many of these places. A lot of those work are now in-house work and saves a lot of money for the government.
You still have some citizens though who are unable to access loans. So though they might have access to the land because the ministry is making those available, their access to credit is still compromised, or they just can't. Is there anything that you can do to help them?
Well, in many cases, I mean, I think most of those issues fall into some kind of administrative kind of arrangements with people. Sometimes maybe what happens in some cases, sometimes people exaggerate to the ministry about how much money they work for, and therefore they are given a plot of land in accordance with how the ministry rank them as far as their income is concerned, what land they can buy, what land they can afford. And then when they go now to the banks, then they cannot pay and the banks examine their abilities to pay and see that they can't pay. Sometimes the banks will have reluctance in lending them to look at their capacity to repay some of these loans. So many of them tend to return, and then you get the truth out of them, and you're able to tailor systems to practically suit them. So, but I don't think that that's a massive, it's such a huge, it's not a very big problem. And those are problems that the ministry, together with the banks, are resolving on a regular basis. So I don't agree that it's a huge problem, but we do have some of those problems coming up from time to time.
And you've put the
systems are in place to try to deal with it, yes.
Mr. President, we've heard you talk extensively about plans for new housing schemes. Now, we know that perhaps the premier among them, outside of the one we can think about, Diamond, the new Diamond housing area. What kind of, what is different about the ones you plan to have now?
But this time we're trying to put more state-of-the-art type of housing, better facilities. We're trying to make it crime-free areas. We're putting in more social facilities for people, areas for playground for children to play, recreational facilities, more schools so that children will not have to travel far distances to get to schools. Some medical facilities, if not full-blown hospitals, some clinic that the people can get services, emergency services, and other type of services in the area. So really to make it a good housing nucleus, like within the different areas, that they can have all the facilities there, build them so that you can build malls, so they don't have to go far to do their shopping, gas stations and so forth in the area, with all the facilities and all the amenities that they have. And I know the Ministry of Housing has also been working very hard and coming up with new ideas about even thinking about building a new city. And some of the ideas they're thinking about is going further on the highway area,
yeah,
to build such a city. And to do that, of course, it will take a lot of planning, because we have to create jobs for people in the area so that they don't have to travel long distances to go to work. Right now, we are going to put down a call center in Tushin, which will employ about 900 persons. We put on a similar call center in Enmore to employ another 900 persons. And then I'm going to the Essequibo Coast to turn the sod to open a new cereal factory so that we can use rice. You know, sometimes we got problems with rice, but I have always been advocating adding value to our products. So this is one area where we can add value to the product by making rice cereal. So people can use rice cereal, and they don't have to make it from the high grain quality rice, but they can make it from broken and good quality rice cereal for people to consume in the area for export, and that is a market that can grow and can account for a lot of significant amount of the rice that is being produced. Then we're thinking also about the Nutribar type of production using rice and other fruits, dried fruits and so forth, that can be done. In Wakenham and Leg 1, we're thinking about creating employment by putting on like chip factories, so they can use like a lot of plantains in Wakenham, for instance. You can have a plantain chip factory, cassava factory, all of these type of things that can be done. So they create employment and offer ready markets to farmers. And we have to build the market, both internally and externally, for the finished products that we have.
Now, when you talk about markets, I know that we have a market. Well, I know there were overtures made for overseas-based Guyanese to access lands in Guyana. Are they still coming in droves? Are they still taking advantage?
Yes, I know that we had some oversubscribed. The land that was put aside for Guyanese who wants to come back home, for either remigrating here to live and work here, or some people who want to probably come and retire, or for whatever reason. The lands that we've put aside for them have been oversubscribed, and a lot of people are coming in. They want to come and live and work in Guyana. And I suspect largely because the quality of life has been developing. In the housing areas we have been putting in, I mentioned to you just now, the roads, like if you look at Parkgate Harmony, only on Friday, Thursday, I was on the West Demerara, where the new West Demerara highway will be put in place. And that will also cut travel time between Parika and Wiedenhoop by you know, by about between 20 to 50% of the time that they take to travel, that we can cut that time. But at the same time, we are looking very carefully at part of the project is an educational project of how to use the road so that we can prevent the frequency of road accidents on the road, and in order to have quicker, more efficient, but safe uses of the highways that we are building. We are also thinking about pushing lands, which will also open new lands, both for agriculture. We can go to homesteads, the old Del Conte Road, going from Porica, going all the way opposite to Bartica to Gorshan Road, where you can open new lands for farming, different type of agricultural products, and also schemes, housing schemes will obviously develop into those areas, and we can look at the modern kind of housing and the facilities that people can have. Same thing we are also thinking in the Quarantine, the road from Crabwood Creek to going down to Oriada, to start looking at those. We're now doing the study and looking at those roads as possibilities of opening, pushing those roads, improving the infrastructure while opening new lands, and new schemes can develop there. But as I said, we want to ensure that when we build these new schemes, that we create employment so that people would not have to travel long distances to get to work, and save them money in that way.
I know we're running out of time, but I have to ask you, are you looking to move some of these housing developments out of the city? There has been, you know,
it's natural. It's natural because of the facility that not only facility, the availability of land in the urban areas is much less. So we have to be going, and that's why the city is expanding. I was mentioning last Thursday when we opened when we looked at launching of the project for the new West Demerara Highway, that we were also going to build the roads into West Bank and the Canal 1 and 2. But at the same time, we're looking to bridge another bridge, a more permanent fixed structure across the Demerara River, where Georgetown itself can be expanded, because if you go to Vredenhoek, you can see the urbanization that is taking place. So Georgetown itself it is possible now that with that kind of infrastructure, that Georgetown itself can expand across the Demerara River to accommodate other like places like Vredenhoek and so forth, to be part of the city because of what is taking place there, and the infrastructure of a bridge linking going across the river itself. So there are a lot of plans, and the city is growing in size and getting bigger and bigger. When I came to Georgetown in the late 50s, it was a very small city from what it is today, and we can see that trend, that it is growing bigger and bigger all the time.
All right, Mr. President, I can't let you go without asking, do you have anything planned over the next 5 years for persons that they can access land and finance that we have not heard about?
Well, we're thinking about to also, you know, that we're very strong in education too, and our country has a growing reputation of the education services that we provided. And we want to provide more and more. We want to have a very educated workforce in our country, because we believe that there is a direct link between education and development. And for that reason, we're considering very seriously about looking at graduates from the university, from any of the universities that are recognized here in Guyana. People, of course, there will be some conditions attached about the level of passes and so forth, but looking at giving them incentives to study harder by able to provide them with lands so that they can also build their own home, young professional. We already started a young professional scheme, but also to try to expand that, to have other people. There are other measures that we are also thinking of putting in place to help people, like to cut the time, the process, the timing that it will take, to use more of the information technology. Because as I go around the country talking to people, this is one of the complaints I get, that sometimes they say that these things take too long. I don't always agree that that is so, but if we can shorten the time, of course it will be better for everyone. And I think here, information and communication technology, putting a lot of these things online, doing a lot of the processing online itself, will be able to cut the time that from application to actually delivery of some of these lands, and that is and also for titling and so forth. So that is the kind of direction that we're going to look at in the next couple of years.
Certainly, we've also heard about the having your if you were turned down, you can have there's an appeals process. I understand as well that you can now that it's under it's in the train, so the persons can now go and have an appeal appeal to have their application looked at if they were turned down for any reason.
Yes, that is there, that is in place. And two, also there's a slight flexibility to deal with emergencies, like people who have
special needs and all
special
of that.
needs and so on and so forth, that the ministry has put in place some flexibility into the system to deal with these real needy cases that they have to put in place. Normally, generally, just to go along with the time, sometimes it takes a year or two to get some of them dealt with. But for some special cases, I think once they verify, these things must be verified and so forth.
So the process becomes more transparent.
More transparent.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, Mr. President, another good discussion with you, and of course to hear your vision this time for the housing sector. We thank you very much for having us again. I just have to say we did enjoy the ambient sounds from the birds, and of course it was nice being here with you. So that brings us to the end of another discussion with His Excellency Donald Ramotar. My name is Juanita Huburn. On behalf of the production team, we wish you well, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.